Welcome back to Unhooked. I'm your host, Jeremy Lipkowitz. Today's episode is a re-release of an interview I did on the podcast Unashamed Unafraid. They come from a faith-based recovery lens, while I come from a secular, mindfulness-based lens, and we find a lot of common ground between us. In this interview, we talk about the hidden drivers underneath porn use, why the consequences can be subtle but serious, and how mindfulness and self-compassion help you step out of the craving loop and rebuild self-trust. Quick announcement before we jump into the episode. If you've had a slip recently and you want to get back on track, I've put together a free 14-day reset. It's a short daily email challenge designed to help you regain your momentum, rebuild self-trust, and get steady again without shame or white knuckling. The link to join is in the show notes. All right, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to Unashamed Unafraid, a podcast dedicated to being unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing. Today we've got Jeremy Lipkowitz. Is that how I pronounce your last name?
You said it just right. Yeah, Jeremy Lipkowitz.
Okay, love that. I'm here with James, and we're gonna hop right into this story. So, Jeremy, can you just walk us from beginning? Like, how did you end up on our podcast? Tell us your story.
Yeah, so my story goes back to my own story with addiction to porn primarily. I guess a little background for who I am and what I'm doing here. Currently, I'm an ICF certified coach. I work with men who are recovering from porn addiction. I'm also a meditation teacher, so mindfulness and meditation was a big part of my background. But it really started with my own addiction to porn, starting
What was
really
the acronym that you just said? The IFCS, is that what you said?
ICF. So ICF is the
ICF?
International Coaching Federation.
Okay, right
Yeah.
on. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the type of coaching that I do with guys.
Cool.
ICF. So my story, started when I was young, 7, 8, 9 years old, getting, introduced to pornographic material. And it just grew over time, started with magazines that were coming in the mail, the Victoria's Secret catalog type things, not real hardcore porn. But it slowly progressed, and day by day it got deeper, and the advent of the internet came. And by the time I was in college, I was watching porn every night for an hour or two. And it became a part of my life, and I didn't realize there was anything wrong with it, even though I had this kind of sense of shame around it. But, at some point, I started to see the impacts it was having on my life, the ways it was impacting my sense of self-worth, my relationships with others, my intimacy, just all the ways it was starting to ruin my life. I can talk more about the big moment of realization when I finally made a change. But eventually I found my way out of it. And ever since then, I've been helping people kind of learn how to do some of these things as well, because it can be a really destructive force in life if you're not aware of it, if you're not cognizant of some of the impacts. I think a lot of guys out there don't even realize the harms it's causing. So I just see it as a mission of mine to help educate and help people walk out of that darkness.
Could you speak to some of the pain earlier on in your life that created an environment where addiction, habit, whatever word you would use, was able to thrive and become, like what you described in your college years?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of us understand, at least theoretically, that addiction comes from some past trauma. There was something that happened in all of our lives that causes us to reach out for an escape mechanism, a way to numb out. But I do like to highlight that trauma doesn't have to be some big capital T trauma. It doesn't have to be some moment when you were sexually, assaulted or molested, or, some death in the family of someone close to you. It can just be all the lowercase t traumas that happen throughout your life. So I was bullied at times when I was a kid. There were times where I didn't get my needs met, where I felt like my parents weren't there for me. So all just the little moments of not feeling like I had my needs met. And then starting to learn through experience that, hey, this porn thing and this masturbation thing provided me a sense of control, gave me a sense of comfort. It was a good way to escape any of the pain that I was feeling that I hadn't been taught how to deal with otherwise. And so, for me, there wasn't some huge, big trauma. It was just all the little ways that I wasn't getting my needs met. And over time, that porn habit developed in secret, developed in isolation, behind closed doors. And it was something that I just used as a way to medicate and to regulate my emotions. And in the beginning, it was just, oh, this feels good. Why not do more of it? Over time, it sinks its teeth into you, and the roots of that can really go deep and cause a lot of harm.
I find it fascinating that you said that it doesn't have to be this big traumatic event. I think a lot of times guys don't understand that. So could you speak a little bit more to that? Like what really resonates with guys who have gone through that kind of an experience? Like what is it like to work with dudes who you coach, who come to you and they have that kind of a story and they're like, well, I don't know, I haven't been sexually abused, I haven't been physically abused, I don't have a hard past, and they can't figure out why they can't stop
Yeah.
looking at porn. Like what's
Yeah,
been your experience?
totally. And not only that, a lot of the guys I work with, maybe come from more liberal backgrounds and, never really thought of porn as being kind of a sin or anything inherently wrong with it. And so they kind of come to this point where it's like, I didn't even realize there was something wrong with this, but at some point I started to see, yeah, this is not in line with my values. And this is not, I don't feel like I'm in integrity when I'm watching this stuff. Because in our society, it is so normalized, porn. It's everywhere. It's people pretend it's what's the big deal? It's just porn. And we don't realize how out of integrity it is. And so a lot of the guys I work with have this experience of, I don't know why I'm addicted to this thing. I can't stop it and I don't know why. And, to be fair, a lot of the guys I work with do have some big trauma in their life. They have had, sexual assault or abusive parents or all kinds of different things that have happened. So it can really affect all of us, men and women. It's just a very addictive substance. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, is that all of us as humans, we want to run away from pain and we want to run towards what feels good. That's kind of inherent in our biology, in our physiology. And so when you have some of these artificial substances and behaviors that are just highly dopaminergic, and they're such an easy source of escape and numbing out and feeling good, of course we're going to get addicted to it, and it takes some real awareness and some real clarity to see some of the effects, because a lot of the consequences of porn are subtle. They're maybe downstream, they're long term, there's small things that add up over time. And a lot of guys aren't aware of these long term consequences because they're little things that slowly erode at your integrity, your sense of self worth, your expectations of your partners and intimacy. So many things that you don't right away notice, oh, this is having some crazy effect on my life. But if you do it, on a constant daily basis for years or decades, it can really erode at your soul.
So something that stuck out to me, we were just chatting right before we started this, is I said, so I'm assuming you're a person of faith, and you said, no, I'm not religious. And that's something that's like pretty rare, I think, in recovery circles. And I'm so excited to dig into this because I think you're going to unlock a lot of principles that we generally attach to religion that can be used just in a broad sense. So can you tell us about like who God is to you, or what the role of faith or lack of faith has played in your life and how you find that? Because I'm so excited to hear what this looks like for you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're excited for it.
And we don't want to
For me,
alienate like half of our audience, because I know that like we know that we're going to pull in a religious or Christian audience, but please, we welcome those that don't walk that walk. Because us, like you, we just want to help people that are struggling with this.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be exclusionary by saying, you got to believe in Jesus to get here. So we really cherish your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you guys are open to that, because, for myself, I've never been a believer. I've never had faith. And so kind of the question of who God is to me, it's not really even a question I can answer because it's just, I just don't believe in a God. I'm kind of maybe agnostic. There could be something out there, but it's, I don't really hold a lot of belief in any particular faith tradition. I was kind of raised much more in the atheist kind of agnostic sense. But in terms of, just how I approach this, it's, coming at this from a secular perspective, it's not a religious, oh, this is living in sin. It's just, is this actually helping me live my best life? Am I, finding life deeply fulfilling? Am I living in integrity? Am I feeling good? Am I feeling at peace inside myself? And those are important questions that I started to ask because I realized, there was this one moment that really stood out for me. I was around 23 years old, maybe 24. I just graduated from university. I was doing some research in the university that I had graduated from. And I remember just walking down the street and seeing these two, young college girls in front of me and just being consumed with this feeling of lust, consumed with desire and craving and sexual longing. And it was in that moment that I realized how much suffering is caused by lust and by craving things you don't have. And it was wild to me because in that moment, my life was actually really good. I was a stellar, rock star student at the University of California, Davis. I had a lot of friends. I was captain of a sports team. The skies were blue. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful life. But in that moment of lusting after these women, all of that went out the window. I couldn't see or be grateful for anything that was going well in my life. All I saw was what I didn't have, what I wanted and didn't have. And in that moment, it felt like this black hole opened up inside of me, this empty pit. And I realized that I could not be happy unless I acquired that thing. And it was in that moment that I realized that lust is a state of suffering. It's not a state of abundance or fulfillment or inner peace or gratitude or appreciation. And so what it really came down to for me was, if I want to be truly happy, and not happy in the sense of like putting a smiley face on and being bubbly, but deeply at peace inside, if I wanted a sense of inner peace and inner fulfillment, I had to look at this question of what leads to real happiness and what leads to suffering, what leads to a state of inner peace and abundance and gratitude versus what leads to a life of misery and dissatisfaction and discontent. And so that sent me down this long journey of looking at this question of happiness. And I ended up, having a bit of an existential crisis. It sent me, looking for answers. And I went to a bookstore and started finding books on positive psychology, where I started to learn about neuroscience and neuroplasticity and understanding the way that the mind works. And that then led me to a book called Happiness by Mathieu Ricard. And he's a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And that book just fundamentally changed my life. It totally opened my eyes because this Tibetan monk, he was actually a French guy, was born in Paris, went to the Pasteur Institute, getting his PhD in molecular biology. So he had this scientific background, but ended up traveling to India and learning about Buddhist philosophy and learning about meditation. And what he described was a very secular, I had always thought that Buddhism was like another religion. Like, oh, okay, there's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism. It turns out Buddhism is less of a religion. It's more of a philosophy of the mind. It's really about understanding what causes suffering and what leads to happiness. And so this author, Mathieu Ricard, he described this kind of Buddhist philosophy in a very secular way that really spoke to me. And it was all about understanding the way the mind works. And I started to realize that what porn was doing to my mind, I was cultivating these mental qualities that were directly leading to my suffering. Every time I logged onto porn and watched it, I was hardwiring the neural pathways of lust and craving and suffering. And so all the sadness that I had in my life, all the dissatisfaction, the depression, the discontent, was because of my own actions. And there was one quote that really changed things for me. It was this quote from a neuroscientist that said, "Neurons that fire together wire together." And it helped me understand that every time I logged onto porn, again, I was strengthening those neural pathways. And it wasn't just strengthening the neural pathways, for lust after porn. It was just strengthening the pathways of wanting something I didn't have and not being satisfied with what I did have. What was cool, though, is that the converse is true, is that you can use that understanding to strengthen the neural pathways, the mental qualities of things that directly lead to happiness. And what I realized in that moment is what I want is a life filled with gratitude, a life filled with contentment and inner peace and abundance and compassion and connection and all these good things. And you can train your mind to feel those ways simply by strengthening those neural pathways. And that's essentially what meditation is. Meditation is not this kind of woo-woo, mystical, magical thing. It's not anything fluffy out there. It's just training the mind in certain mental qualities. And for me as a secular person, that really spoke to me as, hey, this is a way I can lead a better life, and just train my mind to be happier. So that was kind of my story with porn addiction, how porn got me into these questions of living a better life, because that's what it really became. It was less just about porn. And that's what I try to help guys see, this question of porn recovery. It's not about just stopping watching porn. It's not going to fix your life. It's about, are you leading a better life? Are you leading a more fulfilling life? Are you doing things out of integrity? That's what recovery is really about.
Yeah, that's what we would call living and embracing a recovery lifestyle. That's exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, tell us about the recovery lifestyle. I find it fascinating that, your story of how you got to the place where you realized that porn just didn't work within your value system, that you wanted something else. How did you work your way to a place where you started embracing this type of a value system in your life, where you've kind of built yourself over the last 15-ish years to where you are now?
Yeah. It's quite interesting because I didn't really connect with addiction or recovery or these kind of topics until many years later. It wasn't until maybe even a decade later that I started to really connect with the recovery world and the addiction world. For me, at the beginning, when I had these insights into what was going on with porn and what was going on with my mind, it was just, hey, this is not leading to happiness, and I need to start to live in a healthier way. And the primary avenue for me was through mindfulness practices. So really learning that if I wanted to be happier, if I wanted to practice recovery, it meant understanding my mind, understanding my emotions, and learning how to cultivate a healthier mental place. Learning how to work with negative emotions, because I think a lot of us intuitively know, and we've been in this game long enough, addiction comes from coping mechanism, wanting to run away from unpleasant emotions. It's whether it's sadness, anxiety, insecurity, boredom. We feel these unpleasant things and we don't like it, right? And so we say, I don't like this feeling inside of me. Let me numb out. And that can be a very subconscious thing for many people. Many guys don't realize that they're running to porn because they're trying to escape a negative emotion. But once you have some awareness, you start to realize every time I'm running into porn or to some other unhealthy habit, it's because I'm running away from a painful experience that I don't know how to be with, right? I don't know how to be with sadness. I don't know how to be with loneliness. I don't know how to be with anger towards someone who abused me. And so I need to make this bad feeling go away by numbing out. And whether that's porn or junk food or video games or making money, all these things can be addictions. So for me, one of the fundamental ways that I practice recovery is learning how to be with discomfort without running away from it. Learning how to be with what's unpleasant without thinking I need to medicate it away. Right? So that is such an important part of my recovery is if there's something strong, some strong negative feeling, to learn how to sit with it is something you can train your mind to do. That's one of the practices of mindfulness. We call it equanimity. So the training in equanimity is learning how to be with what's unpleasant without running away. Just be there with it. Similarly, the flip side of it is it's also learning how to be with what's pleasant without grasping after it. Because that's the flip side of the same coin. There's something pleasant in our experience, some good tasting food, some visual thing that we watch that feels good. Ooh, that's juicy. Oh, I like that, right? So how to be with that pleasant experience without clinging onto it and craving after it is also the practice of equanimity. So, fundamentally, it was just like I started learning all these tools of the mind that helped me live a better life, that got me into less trouble, That's what it was really about for me.
What was it like to practice those at the beginning? Like hard, struggled, like kind of walk us through. I'm assuming that you didn't pick it up and it happened right away. So I just want to dispel the myth that would happen. So kind of walk us through a little bit of the struggles of the learning curve.
Totally. Yeah, it wasn't like a moment of insight that led to some profound awakening and then I was an enlightened being that just floated through the world. It's been a long journey and it continues to be a journey. It's constantly peeling back layers of the onion. I still get hung up on things all the time. It's a constant practice, and that's the message I try to send also. You don't have to be perfect. It's like every step you take along the path makes your life better. Every moment that you can let go of being hooked by some craving is a moment where your life improves. So for me, the early days, I was very fortunate. I found this book, Happiness, by Mathieu Ricard, talked about this kind of Buddhist philosophy, this secular mindfulness training. And I was fortunate enough to then travel to India. And I spent 3 months traveling through India and started going on these meditation retreats. You might be familiar with them. So there's these silent meditation retreats. So for 10 days, you go into a retreat center. There's no talking, reading, or writing. You're not journaling. You're not chit-chatting with the other participants. You give up all your electronics. You're, for 10 days, just being with yourself, practicing these mindfulness practices. And there's no distraction. There's no like, oh, let me turn on the TV, let me check my email. It's one of the most challenging things I've ever done and also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. So those practices and those retreats became a big part of my life. I've now gone on close to 20 of these silent meditation retreats. It's kind of a regular tune-up for my mind. But it's a challenge. I mean, it gives you the awareness of what's going on in your life, but still choosing how to live skillfully is always a challenge because you're working against a lot of momentum of your former life. Sometimes just the habitual energy of, oh, let me eat this junk food. Let me watch another episode on Netflix. It can be hard to break free from the momentum of life. But that's what we're doing, training how to live more skillfully.
It's well put. You speak a little bit more about that concept of momentum. I think that's kind of a cool concept, and there might be some good connections there with mindfulness.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this idea of momentum, it was one of the things that I really started realizing when I started looking at my own porn addiction is how much of my mind there were such deep grooves in my mind towards lust and objectification and craving and wanting. And it was like the default habit pattern of my mind was I walk into a cafe and I'm already scanning to see who's attractive in the cafe, right? To objectify someone. And it was just, those were the deepest grooves in my mind. Those were the super highways in my mind because of how many hours I had spent objectifying women on porn and in life. And so working with that, again, it comes back to neuroplasticity. It's like learning how to rewire your mind and create new grooves in the mind so that over time, the default habit pattern of the mind can be one of appreciation or contentment, you know? And that's what I realized I really wanted. Like when I walked into a room and my default habit pattern was lust, it was a state of lack, a state of not having enough. It was, who can I find to fulfill my sexual desire? And again, it was a state of suffering. And what I realized, what I wanted was my default habit pattern of my mind to be compassion or connection or curiosity. I mean, if you can live a life where the default, just the first thought that pops into your head is, oh, I wonder if this person is okay and how can I help? Or if the first thought that pops into your mind is, I have enough, I don't need anything else, your life is just so much better. Like your life is fundamentally happier versus if you walk into, some department store and your mind is just filled with greed. I want that. I need that. If I don't get that watch or this phone, then I'm not going to be good enough or happy enough, right? It's a miserable way to live your life. There's one kind of story from Buddhist philosophy that I really love. So in Buddhist cosmology, there's these different realms of existence. And they're not real realms. It's not like these are actual places, but they're more manifestations of the mind. So, there's the realms, like there's the hell realm where everything is just, miserable. There's the heavenly realm where everything is pleasant and feels good. There's the human realm that we live in. There's the animal realm where everything is just animalistic, primal urges. And then there's this one really interesting realm. It's called the realm of the hungry ghosts. And it's this realm filled with these creatures that walk around and they have huge distended bellies, these massive stomachs and tiny little mouths. And they wander around and their mouths are so small, they can never eat enough to satisfy their hunger. So they wander this existence just constantly hungry and never satisfied, constantly craving more because they can never eat enough to satisfy their hunger. And so that realm of the hungry ghosts is what we live in the state of addiction. It's, I need more, I need this thing, and I can never satisfy that hunger. I can never fill the void that's inside of me. And that's, that's the life that so many of us live in our society. It's not just porn, it's, I need more gadgets, I need more followers, I need more sex, whatever it is. We're wandering this realm of being a hungry ghost.
Jeremy, I'm going to be true to our podcast name and live unashamed here. I'm curious what you would say to a guy like me. Everything you just described is like, that's what I feel like I'm a hungry ghost. And as you said that, like you were talking about the scenario where you walk into a cafe and you're like already, your mind preemptively is like trying to identify who the next person is that can fulfill your sexual desire, to consume the next, piece of beauty, however you would refer to it. What would you say? I mean, what would you say to a guy like me, as far as, mindfulness and mindset shifts to start challenging those thoughts and be more at peace within myself? Because there's like, I don't know, I'm just having a really strong reaction to all the things you're saying right now. And I think that you have some gems that could help me.
Totally. I mean, and this is like mindfulness training. It's going to the gym for your mind. It's just, we go to the gym for our bodies all the time, right? We think, okay, I got to do some cardio. I've got to lift weights if I want to be strong and fit and healthy. We don't realize our mind needs that kind of work as well. If you want to walk into that cafe and just be kind of grounded in a state of peace and contentment where you're not looking for something to fulfill the void inside of you. The way to do that is to strengthen that muscle in your mind, to cultivate that neural pathway. And so the way that this works is the training in mindfulness. As an example, one of the most common kind of basic mindfulness practices is mindful breathing. There are many different kinds of meditation, but one very simple one. You sit down, you feel the sensation of your breath as you breathe in and as you breathe out, and you're just feeling it in the body. And then when your mind wanders away, you come back, you just gently bring it back and you say, okay, oh, my mind has wandered. Let me come back to this feeling of the breath. And you do this when you come back in a non-reactive way. You're not judging your mind for having wandered. You're just saying, okay, come back and start again. When you're doing that, what you're doing is you're strengthening so many of these qualities that you want to pervade your life. You're strengthening non-reactiveness. You're strengthening, oh, this breath right here is good enough. I don't need some fantasy. I don't need, to think about something. I can just be here with this breath, and that's all I need. You're also strengthening, kindness towards yourself. Instead of beating yourself up for having wandered off in your meditation, you say, oh, that's okay. I know I'm doing my best, right? When you're sitting, you might feel uncomfortable. You might have some agitation, some pain in your knee, but instead you just notice, oh, there's pain, but I don't need to scratch that itch. I can just be with this discomfort. So you're getting more in control of your mind rather than being, when I was addicted to porn, I felt enslaved by my lust. My guess is you kind of know that feeling where you don't want to go and objectify people in a cafe, but you walk in and let's say you see the most attractive woman in the world, like your perfect ideal 10 out of 10, the most sexy person you could imagine. And you're sitting in the cafe, you're trying to read a book, but your mind just keeps looking at her. Like, I just need to look, right? And you're enslaved by that feeling of lust. And that's a horrible way to live, right? Because I know this isn't making me happier. I know this is wrong to be objectifying her and ogling her. I should just be reading my book like I wanted to. Why can't I? My mind has hijacked me and hooked me. And so when you train in mindfulness, you're taking back the reins. You're taking back the driver's seat on the bus, and you're saying, oh, I see that desire to look at that person. But actually, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to read my book and to be at peace. And so you're regaining control through these mindfulness practices. That's what you're training your mind how to do. How to, first of all, be aware that you're hooked. Because sometimes you don't even notice it until 5 minutes later. But being aware that you're hooked is also part of the mindfulness training. To be aware of what's happening. Oh, I'm hooked right now. I'm filled with lust and I can't stop looking at this person. Oh, how interesting. That pattern is happening again, right? So it's like mental self-mastery is what mindfulness is really about.
I can just give an amen to that. So I would say that simple meditation that you told me, the breathing meditation, I did that for about 2 years pretty solidly toward the beginning of my recovery process. But I also experienced some deep depression at that season as well. Since that time, my whole life has been different. The depression hasn't come back. My engagement in my recovery changed. That trajectory changed. It changed a lot of aspects of my emotional and mental experience. So I'm just going to give an amen to that, a testimonial.
Yeah. And just to speak on that a little bit, like you mentioned the depression, right? Like, and there's maybe some negative emotions. One of the superpowers that mindfulness can give us is, again, the ability to be with those emotions and not run away from them, because that is part of recovery. Is when you're feeling really sad or when there's real grief about something, the way to heal that is not to distract ourselves, not to push it away or suppress it. The way to heal that is to actually be with it. And learning how to be with such a difficult emotion is one of the meditation tools. And there's various tools. One is equanimity, But another really important one is training the mind in self-compassion. That is something, again, we don't get taught how to do that in school, but it's something you can train your mind to be better at. Oh, how can I be compassionate towards myself?
Can you walk me through what it would look like to use self-compassion in the scenario that you just described in the cafe, right? You're like, you see the
Yeah.
10 and your mind can't get off of it. I think so many men experience that. I for sure do. What does it look like to have self-compassion in that moment?
Yeah. Great question. So what it looks like is you're sitting there, your mind is hooked, and you're having this inner battle, this turmoil of like, I want to look, but I know I shouldn't. And there's this craving, this longing, right? Which again is a state of suffering. When there's something you want that you don't have, that's what suffering is. You want some experience that you don't have, you suffer, right? And so that's a difficult experience. You're going through a difficulty. So what compassion, self-compassion would look like there is to treat yourself the way you would treat anyone going through a difficult experience. Like if you have a really close friend, or let's say a nephew or someone who just you really care about, and they're going through a really painful experience, the way you respond to them is, hey, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Like, I'm here for you. You know, you're not trying to dismiss the pain, say, that's not painful. Suck it up. You know, you say, hey, like, are you okay? I'm here for you. What you're going through is difficult. That's compassion. It's acknowledging the suffering and letting that person know that you care for them. You do the same for yourself. When you're in a state of suffering, you say, whoa, this is a really difficult experience for me. And I care about the fact that I'm suffering. I care for myself. I care about this feeling, and I wish for myself to be free from this suffering. That's what compassion is. Whether it's towards someone else, you know, I care about the fact that you're suffering and I wish for you to be free from that suffering, or towards yourself. Hey, I'm suffering and I care about that fact. And I wish for myself to be free from suffering. And an important part is understanding there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain, there's a wonderful saying by like marathon runners. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain is something we will all experience. Unpleasant emotions are things we will all experience. We will all experience loneliness, boredom, anxiety, stress, physical pain. It's the way that we suffer about those things that we can lessen. You know, we don't have to suffer for the grief or suffer for the anxiety. The other thing I like to point out is the flip side is true as well. Pleasure is inevitable. Happiness is optional. A lot of people confuse pleasure with happiness. And one thing we have to learn is that pleasure, having more pleasure, does not mean you're going to have more happiness. And that's a fundamental truth that the more you really understand that on an experiential level, the less you're going to be addicted. Because when you don't understand that, you're hooked and you're enslaved by that craving. You think, oh, that sex is going to make me feel good. So therefore it will make me feel happy. And so I'm going to chase after it. But when you realize, hey, I've had enough sex, I've had enough pleasure in my life, and it hasn't led to happiness, it starts to dispel that myth that, oh, just more pleasure will bring you happiness. What brings real happiness is, you know, being, you know, connected to something greater. You know, for you guys, it's faith. For me, it's just connected to compassion and love and being a good person in the world. Being of service, you know, something that brings real happiness. Helping others, right? Gratitude, that's what brings happiness. So pleasure does not bring happiness in the same way that pain does not have to bring suffering.
So we've got probably somewhere between 800 and 1,000 people who will listen to this podcast and have their minds blown the same way that mine is right now. And so I'm curious if you could just speak a little bit about your professional career, what you do right now, and how people can get a little bit more in touch with the resources you offer. Because this is awesome. This is awesome stuff.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's connected. I'm glad your mind has been blown. I mean, that's what happened to me when I started to realize just like what was going on in the mind is so important, because it's not just about porn, it's about every aspect of our lives. Our relationships with the people we care about, our ability to find, a sense of happiness and satisfaction at work. It's all about how we're relating to these experiences in our mind, right? Um, so in terms of, what I do, my background is in the sciences and genetics, but then I shifted from that to teaching meditation. I taught meditation for about 10 years, was leading meditation retreats and teaching in Thailand. And inevitably, I kind of started working with more people one-on-one. And that was about 7, 8 years ago. And I realized just a deep sense of meaning by being able to go deep with people, really go to the root of what they were struggling with, and realize that, my gateway into this was through my porn addiction. And there's a lot of guys out there struggling with that. So I started helping people just learn the same things that I learned, learning how to practice mindfulness and meditation and self-compassion as a way to overcome porn addiction. And we haven't even talked about shame. I mean, you guys, the podcast you guys have is such a great name, Unashamed, because letting go of shame is such an important part of overcoming this particular addiction, especially, porn addiction and sex addiction. There's so much shame associated with that. And part of the healing is letting go of shame and letting yourself be seen, letting yourself be in community and talk about these things openly. So what I do now, I work with people one-on-one, but I also run a community. It's called the Unhooked Academy, and it's a shame-free secular space where people can talk about, what they're struggling with and get support, get accountability. Meditation, mindfulness is a big component of that. But that's really kind of what I do. I also have a podcast that people can check out. It's called Unhooked. So that's a little bit of who I am and what I do.
What kind of?
We'd love to be on your podcast, or Sam would. You said it's, you run a community, a secular community. Is it okay if people of faith come and participate in that community with you?
Totally.
Okay.
There's, I would say maybe a third of the members are people of faith and talk about their faith. It's secular in the sense that it's open to anyone. And so we have people of different faiths, people of no faiths. And it's really a judgment-free space, to be yourself. And it's also, it's less prescriptive in the sense of you must do this and this and this. It's really about helping each individual person find their own pathway forward. So for some people, it really is, getting more engaged in their faith community. And for other people, it's, being of service in other ways, that's not a religious sense, but in just being in service in their community. So the community is open to everyone.
Wow. Jeremy, if you could succinctly wrap up the main points of everything that you've discussed today, how would you say that?
Whew.
Tips to just
quick tips, like give us the kind of the final last thoughts.
how do you
Yeah. I mean, there's maybe two things that are coming to mind. Like, one relates to this topic of shame, and just for anyone out there listening, just to know that you're not alone in this, and you're not broken, you're not flawed, there's nothing to be ashamed of. That, the fact that you watch porn, there's nothing wrong with you, and you're not a bad person. You got hooked by this multi-billion-dollar industry that is preying on your attention and preying on your physiology, and it's preying with an E, not preying with an A. It's attacking your attention, trying to eat it up, and so it's not your fault, that you watch porn, and it is your responsibility to do something about it, but it's not your fault. So just to know that you're not alone, and that hope is possible, change is possible, no matter how many years you've been watching porn, no matter how many decades. I have seen so many transformations, so many people that have been watching for decades, and in the matter of a couple months, turn their life around completely. And that the key to that is really through awareness. Awareness for me is so important. because you can tell yourself, yeah, this is bad for me, or oh, my pastor says this is a sin, so I shouldn't do it, or my wife says this is bad, so I shouldn't do it. But that's only going to get you a quarter of the way there compared to if you fundamentally have looked within and you know the ways that this is harming your life and say, wow, I feel how this doesn't feel right. I feel how this is out of integrity. When you have that kind of experiential awareness of the harms of porn, your recovery is going to go so much further. And that it just takes cultivating awareness. And mindfulness, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most effective, fastest ways to cultivate awareness. I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm not saying you have to do it. You can journal, you can talk to a therapist. There are a lot of other ways to cultivate some awareness. But mindfulness is a tool that's been honed over thousands of years for really investigating what's going on in your experience. And as far as I found it, it's the most effective tool, and it's completely secular. Again, there's nothing magical or belief system about it. It's like whether you're Christian or atheist or, whatever, you can investigate your mind. And that's what mindfulness is.
Love it. Jeremy, thanks for being on with us today. Guys, if this was helpful to you, share it with a friend, give us a 5-star rating. As usual, thank you for listening. Super helpful thoughts, Jeremy. So good to be on with you again. That's Jeremy Lipkowitz from Unhooked Academy. He does coaching, he's got support groups, and has his own podcast. Go check out his podcast, Unhooked Academy. Grateful to have you on here. Guys, if you'd like to donate to our cause and help us move this cause forward, you can go on unashamedunafraid.com and become an outsider. Just a small monthly donation helps us do what we do and do it better. And until next time, continue to live unashamed.